We're speaking here with Mr. Jim Higgins, MEP for Ireland North West. Jim, thanks very much for speaking to us as part of the Politics Talk project. Jim, I suppose I would start by asking you to outline, I suppose, the work of your committee in terms of its priorities for this new term in Parliament.
Well, I'm on three committees. I'm on the Transport and Tourism Committee, and then I'm a substitute member of the Fisheries Committee, and I'm also a substitute member of the Petitions Committee. So the problem from the point of view of the practicality of serving three different committees at the same time is that the logistics are just crazy, because they very often clash. From the point of view of the three, I have to make my number one committee Transport and Tourism, but I do manage to dip into fisheries, and will more so by virtue of the fact that we have the green fisheries, the green paper issue in relation to the common fishery policy, which is crucial for Ireland coming up. From the point of view of the Petitions Committee, very interesting committee. 3 weeks ago I had three families out from Ireland in relation to complaints they had against local authorities, Donegal, Mayo and Kerry. Each of the families lost a member of their family as a result of substandard road conditions, lack of signage, loose chippings, neglect on the part, and they got a tremendous hearing. And as a result, the Petitions Committee have decided to do two things. They've decided to write to the Oireachtas Committee on Transport in Ireland and to ask that the three families be facilitated by way of a hearing. And secondly, they have written to the Transport and Tourism Committee asking that a full report will be done in relation to the complaints of the three families. So it just shows how relevant Europe can be in terms of delivering to people who feel that they have not been delivered to by way of the services or the local authorities or government agencies back home.
I mean, that's an interesting application of constituents using, I suppose, the position that their MEP is in Parliament. I suppose moving on then, I mean, to the CFP and the current reform process is something that's of particular importance for the North West constituency. It's a vital time in terms of the types of reforms that are envisaged for the CFP going forward. Do you think Irish interests are going to be adequately represented? Obviously, the Hague preferences are a focus and are a particular concern, and their status are a particular concern. At the same time, we don't want to get expectations too high. How do you think the reform process is going to go?
Well, we're only at the early stage. We're at the green paper stage, and that's absolutely crucial. Pat Cope Gallagher is a full member. I'm a substitute member. Both of us work very closely together, because one of the things that we have done consciously is that when we leave Dublin Airport, we park our political jerseys behind us, whether it's Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil or the Labour Party. We leave our political colours behind us. We resume hostilities when we go back, but out here we all wear the green jersey for Ireland collectively. And Pat and I are working very strongly from the point of view of ensuring that we get what we have not got in relation to fishery policy allocation and quotas up to now, and that is a fair share of our resources. I mean, we have the huge Irish coastline, but from Killybegs right down as far as Dunmore, Eastern Waterford, and down as far as Castle fishermen are suffering badly because they've been let down in terms of negotiations in the past. And we are determined that we are going to ensure, because this is all going to be voted on in Parliament, there's going to be voted on in Parliament, that we are going to use our collective strength to ensure that the quotas are at least fair in terms of giving Irish fishermen the right to earn a livelihood, which at present they are suffering very badly from Greencastle, every single, Rossaville, right down on the west coast. We have both redundant. We want to end that. At the same time, it's a question of getting the balance right between the environment, the conservation of stocks, and the right to earn your livelihood. And it's difficult to achieve that balance. We've got to ensure that we are in there shoulder to shoulder with the Spanish and with the French in relation to ensuring that Irish fishermen's interests are defended when D-Day comes in relation to the final recommendations and negotiations.
Because, I mean, obviously, focusing on a policy which is of real domestic importance, I think the Hague preferences are something that have been targeted by the likes of the Spanish, for example, when it comes to the establishing of which quotas are going to apply for which member states. Do you think it's going to be enumerated and solidified, or is it going to remain the current status that it has, or do you think it's going to be changed significantly, or is it too early to say?
I think it's too early to say. We're only at deliberation stage at this stage. A lot of negotiation will take place. All we've had as of now is an exchange of views. But the views are interesting, but our views have been put forward very forthright. And whether or not it's going to be the status quo, whether or not it's going to be a change. Personally, I want to see a change, but I want to see that change delivered in terms of looking after our vital interest.
And then I suppose I would turn Jim just to the role of Questor. It's a role which maybe isn't too clear to some Irish constituents. Would you mind outlining what the role is and just what it involves?
The Parliament is effectively administered by a group of MEPs who are elected. So essentially the administrative body that oversees the administration of the Parliament is a representative one. It consists of the President of the Parliament, that's Jerzy Buzek, 14 Vice Presidents, that's 15, and then there are 5 people elected, directly elected by the MEPs themselves. And I was very honoured that when the votes were counted, the quota was 348 and I got 354. So I was very honoured to have been one of the 5 selected. Effectively, what do we do? It's very much akin to the Oireachtas Commission back home, which is chaired by the Ceann Comhairle and which is made up of all of the constituent member parties. Effectively, they run the administration of the House of the Oireachtas like a separate department, and we are like a separate department. Sure. Effectively, what's my role? Well, first of all, I am the President of the College of Quaestors. I chair the meetings because it rotates on a 6-monthly basis. Secondly, and I made this very strongly when I was making my pitch as a candidate for the position of Quaestor, I didn't put a tooth in it when I said I was going in there as a shop steward to represent the interests of the members. Because what effectively has happened is that as a result of the introduction of what's known as a member statute and as an assistant statute, there had been a terrible tightening in relation to rules and regulations here. It was agreed by the previous administration, the previous bureau, in other words the previous 20 president, 14 vice presidents and 5 quaestors. It was agreed by them that there would be a lot of restrictions in relation to transport and so on. And I am now faced with the task as chairman of the College of Quaestors of dismantling a lot of that. Not that you want to be unreasonable, but a number of the regulations that were introduced were an absolute nightmare in terms of administration, additional costs, effectively more staff, etc. I'll just give you one example. Under this famous member statute that was introduced, when I was elected an MEP, I was told that my airport of travel to Strasbourg and to Brussels was Galway Airport. And there are no flights from Galway Airport. Indeed, Knock is only down the road for me. I'd love if there was a flight from Knock. I'd love if there was a flight from Galway, which is only literally 40 minutes away by travel to Cardinmore. So some civil servant sat down at a computer and saw what was the nearest airport to me. And the same thing happened. Pat Cope Gallagher was told that Belfast was nearest airport, out of the jurisdiction, no direct flights either. So there are small little things like that. And effectively, after 2 months in the job, we have dismantled a lot of them and introduced, if you like, a certain amount of common sense.
And I suppose related to that, do you think that there is enough transparency in the role of MEP? Is there enough transparency in the Parliament per se when it comes to the area of expenses? Obviously it's something which has become particularly sensitive back home in domestic politics, and I imagine the same type of scrutiny is going to apply here. Do you think that that level of scrutiny or of transparency rather is satisfactory here in the European Parliament?
Oh, I think it is, and I think it's vital, because there was a lot of controversy in relation to the fact that, and this arose during the European election campaign itself, that MEPs were getting €1,000 per flight, whereas the face value of the ticket might only be 200 or 300. Which didn't take into consideration that very often the face value of the ticket might be 1,300, but at the same time it was very difficult to justify a face value of €1,000 if you were only paying 200 or 300. We voted to do away with that. You now get the face value of your ticket. In relation to travel, within the constituency there's a very strict limit. You get, I think, something like 15,000 kilometres of travel within the constituency at 49 cent, and that's it, that's the threshold. And anybody who services a constituency that's made up of 3 provinces, Donegal, Cavan, Monaghan, Longford and Westmeath and Leinster, 4 provinces actually, the 5 Connacht counties and Clare, will tell you that 15,000 kilometres. I bought a car last February. I already have 34,000, and every single mile of that, the bulk of the mileage of the kilometres in that would be travelling from Donegal down as far as Shannon, over as far as Mullingar and so on. So that at 49 kilometres you're not nearly reimbursed. So you get everything is transparent. One of the things we are doing is, and I will be doing at the end of the year, is putting my expenses on my website, so people will see exactly what I got by way of salary, what I got by way of expenses, whether it's overnight allowances, whether it's travel, or whatever other kind of reimbursement we get. That would all be there for people to see, because I think that's crucially important, because there is a lot of misconception out there that this is a gravy train. It's not. We have taken a 15% cut in salary. Up to now we were paid by the Oireachtas. Every month, at the beginning of the month, I would get a slip Jim Higgins, MEP TD. So I got exactly the same salary as a TD was getting. Now we've taken the 15% cut in salary because of the fact that what was decided was they would introduce a common basic salary scale. They took the average from Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, United Kingdom, Ireland, etc., right across. They divided it out, and as a result, we have a 15% cut in salary. So it's important that everything goes on the website, and we will be doing that.
Very good. And I suppose then, turning quickly to something which is now past in Ireland, but the Lisbon debates and the issues that were thrown up in both the first one in 2008 and the second in the latter part of this year. I mean, what lessons do you think are there to be learned, and have these lessons been learned by our neighbouring member states, by the other 26? Is there a danger that these lessons might be forgotten?
Well, first of all, from the point of view of any future referendums, I hope we don't have, because the whole purpose of this was to put in place a superstructure for Europe that would take us into the rest of this century, basically to get the machinery right, to get the different elements of it from the point of view of the balance of power. You know, it's really, in my opinion, the balance is absolutely correct now, and that you have total co-decision in terms of the making of the laws. In other words, the Parliament has exactly the same power as the Commission and the Council, so you've got co-decision in relation to the making of laws. Secondly, from the point of view of transparency, all the council meetings where the ministers sit down or prime ministers sit down are now going to be in public, so there can be nothing in camera. The third thing is that we need to continue the process of relating to people, and that was one of the big problems we've always had in relation to Europe, that there's this huge information gap, a relevance gap between what happens out here and the relevance to the ordinary citizen on the ground at home. And that was starkly emphasised in terms of Nice 1, when we voted down Nice 1, in terms of Lisbon 1, where the people of Ireland voted down Lisbon 1. But I think one of the most enlightening and the most encouraging things was that people really engaged in the Lisbon 2 debate. And whether you were on the yes side or the no side, you know, everything was fleshed out in detail. And thankfully, at the end of the day, we had two very, very encouraging factors. First of all, the huge turnout of over 60% nationally, which is almost what you would get at a general election. And the second thing was the fact that over 62% of the people actually voted in favour. So I think it was a good day's work in that regard, in that we demystified a lot of what was out there by way of people's misconceptions as to what Europe is, where it's at and where it's going. But it's very important that we continue this process. Now, we, I think, have set the benchmark in terms of standards by having a referendum. The other countries have decided to do it by way of the parliamentary process. But from the point of view of the whole European project itself, there is still that huge information gap, relevance gap, understanding between the ordinary citizens. You know, they focus for the European referendum like Lisbon, but it's something that we have to work on, and work on very diligently as well, because of the fact that unless we continue to communicate the message of Europe, that will recede into the background in terms of people's understanding of what it's all about.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to us. I appreciate the time you gave, and I wish you the best of luck for the remainder of your term.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.